I often say this to people who want to know, does advertising work? Yes, advertising works, or no one would do it. There's that famous phrase by John Wanamaker. He said, I know half my advertising works, I just don't know which half. And today we have new technologies that allow us to know where it's working, where it's not working. One of the ways we're going to talk about today is Champ Challenger. When I started in this business, creative was king. It was all about the idea. Today, data is king. We're seeing more and more about analytics driving our advertising results and driving the creative itself. There are 4 models for creating a budget planning process in your tracking campaign. The first one is to shoot from the hip. You can simply say, let's set out to accomplish this goal and let's see if it works. And we'll spend this many dollars, and there's no basis in calculating that campaign. That's no way of creating a trackable campaign. The 3 other options are much more effective. I would look at percentage of revenue to say this is the amount of revenue we are going to spend, and this is the amount we expect to return on that basis of spending. So we have a trackable result. We have a return on ad spend opportunity. The other model we look at is what we call cost per acquisition. Cost per acquisition is based on the idea that I have that trackable moment at the end of the chain that I'm going to associate with the advertising at the first touch. And I can know what's my cost per acquisition if I spent $2 on the first touch, $3 on the second touch. I can add that dollar amount up and say that total event cost me, let's say for example, $15 to get a customer to buy this $300 product. Now we can determine what is our cost per acquisition, what is our return on ad spend, ROAS, or ROAS as we often refer to it. A lot of companies are moving toward mobile apps, mobile ordering for the DoorDash type brands of the world. You've got online engagements. You have forms. It's really at the digital form where I fill out and I accept that I'm going to download your white paper, for example. In those moments when I'm giving away the actual email address of the user, I'm giving you my permission to track my advertising behaviors. That's how advertising now can measure the cost per acquisition. What is a Champ Challenger campaign? It's a very simple concept. You take 2, 3, 5 different concepts, run them in the marketplace simultaneously to learn which is better. In a Champ Challenger, there's a couple things you need to keep in mind. First, you need to make sure that you're spending equal amounts of dollars in 3 or 4 or 5 different messages that are running in the marketplace. If you run the same amount of dollars for each, you're giving them an equal opportunity for results. Now, if you're tracking on the back end of that, you can know the cost per acquisition. But you only know cost per acquisition if you're tracking digitally the actual sale in the end of that chain. So ultimately, you have to have your Google Analytics set up, your Tag Manager set up. You have to have all of the pieces in place to measure not only did someone see the ad, they clicked on the ad, and they made the purchase. And the one that works becomes the new champ, and you optimize and optimize and optimize. As you will launch with a very high cost per acquisition, your number might be twice the cost of your product to launch your first Champ Challenger campaign. Once you run that campaign for some time, there's learning that takes place, optimization, and you reduce the campaigns that are not as effective and increase the campaigns that are more effective. Over time, your cost per acquisition goes down. Finally, we look at share of voice. Let's say you want to have 10% market share in a particular industry. Now, if you're spending 2% of the advertising dollars being spent in that industry and you want 10% market share, you're an ambitious person. It's not going to happen. The reality is you've got to spend to where you want to be. If you're spending 2% of the market, you should expect to get 2% of the market. It's simple math. So you need to know what your competition is spending in order to understand your share of voice. If I am spending 50% of the market share of voice and I'm only getting 1% of the market capture rate, I am a failed marketer. That is an absolute fact. However, if I'm spending 1% of the market share of voice and I expect to get 50% of the market share, I'm crazy. And that's not going to happen either. So we need to have a reasonable expectation of advertising. If I go to my stock investor and I give him $1,000 and I tell him I want 1,000% return on this investment or I'm going to take my money back, my financial advisor is simply going to say, keep your money. I can't fulfill that expectation. We might get 2%, we might get 8%. If we're lucky, we'll get 20%, but we're not going to get 1,000% return on your investment. Advertising is very similar. Most of my customers come to me and they want typically a 5-to-1 ratio, meaning 500% return on advertising. That may happen, and I've seen it happen often. However, if our expectation is we're going to shut off advertising if we don't get 500% return on the investment, maybe we're expecting a bit much of advertising, aren't we? What if advertising simply doubled your money? Would you keep doing it? Every time your customer has an experience with your product or service, it's growing and you're going to have an exponential return over time. The main point is this: you can't manage what you don't measure. Start measuring, start somewhere and start small. Make reasonable expectations. So if you're into analytics, please like, share, or please comment if you have ideas about how to do this better. We are constantly learning and optimizing ourselves. This is Daniel Bryan. Do something to disrupt.